Hi, and welcome back to Dishing with Dr. Duer. Pull up a chair and maybe some tissues because we're about to dig in. In today's episode, A Million Goodbyes, we are discussing grief, what that really looks like, how guilt can get in the way of our healing, how we can find forward motion and meaning even in the midst of loss. So I'm joined here today again with one of my favorite colleagues, Natali Rhymes, owner of Envision Counseling. So good morning, Natalie.
Good morning. Thank you for having me again.
Admittedly, this is a heavier topic than we have talked about in any of my past episodes, but I felt like I initially chose the topic because it's very relevant in my own life. But after talking to people and putting it out there that the next episode was going to be about grief, I've been contacted by so many people, each with a unique story, each with a different struggle, saying that they were really glad that this was going to be a topic because it was something that they were struggling with. So I have been praying that what we discussed today will be helpful to anyone who is listening, whether you are struggling with your own loss or you're supporting someone else through their grief journey or whatever the case may be. Um, and really, these people contacting me, the different stories I've heard this week really highlight that grief comes in so many forms. We think about just losing a loved one and we associate grief with that. But there are so many other things that can cause grief or be a part of grief. For instance, there's anticipatory grief. There is loss of an idealized life, the life you thought you were going to have. Um, loss of friendships, there's so many different kinds of losses. And I know this is part of the reason that I'm having this conversation with Natalie is because we have both known each other as we've gone through some pretty serious losses. And we've had lots of conversations about that. I wouldn't say that we're grief experts necessarily in the realm of research, but unfortunately, I do think we are grief experts in the fact that we have lived through probably most of those types of grief.
Yes,
Um,
fortunately.
yes. Fortunately, we're able to talk about it and hopefully help other people maybe work through some things. So and we both discussed too, I thought about before we started, just how honest do I want to be? And we have our tissues right here because I feel like the whole point of Dishing with Dr. Duer is honest conversation. And so not to dig in too deep to start, but what have some of your experiences been with grief?
Not to dig in too deep, she says. Okay.
I don't know if there's a way around that with this topic.
Yeah, no, it's just, and she knows she called the right person when she wants to have a real conversation because for better or worse, that's what you get when you get me. But so the past, what is this, 2025? So the past 3 years have been really tough for me. In 2022, November of 2022, I lost my mom very suddenly. She was healthy, everything was fine. And then she got really sick one day and had to take her to the hospital. She went into liver failure. And then 5 months later, she was gone. And that changed my life forever. So then in 2023, I lost my childhood friend, LaDonna. She passed very suddenly, unexpectedly. Then last year, 2024, my brother died. He did have heart issues. So that wasn't a total shock. It wasn't,
Yeah.
it still wasn't expected. You don't ever expect to get that call and you're never prepared for it. So personally, I've had quite a bit of experience with grief and then also having friends and clients too that have had it. I will say, the fortunate, I guess, part side of it is once you go through it, you are better equipped to help somebody else or sit with them in their grief, I think.
Yes. Similarly, I think I've had experience with grief since childhood, honestly. When I was 2, my brother was in a really bad car fire. Wasn't an accident. He was an infant. And that just set the course for so many different events. And to this day, speaking about the loss of an idealized life, my mom has a big framed picture, and it's a husband and wife, and she's got a baby on her hip, and then there's a little boy playing on like a toy tractor on a farm. And at that time, my parents had just bought a farm. That was our life, and that was what they envisioned was, having children and growing up on the farm, and eventually someday, the boys taking over. And in that instant, that was gone. And that was not, he was legally blind after that. So never going to drive, never going to, you know, do a lot of the things. And that dream was gone. So that was probably my first experience with, and that wasn't necessarily my grief, but I felt that in everything um, in our family because it was just a repeated reminder. And then, gosh, we had a really tough year. I think I tried to block it out. I don't remember the exact year. I think it might have been like 2005, 2006. I lost my grandmother, which that one, I do miss her terribly. She was a wonderful person, but she was very Christian. She was very positive. I have no doubts that she is singing with the angels in heaven. It was a different kind of sad. It wasn't a devastating loss because she was right where she wanted to be.
And I think when your grandparent passes, there's part of you that knows that's going to
Yes.
happen because they're getting older and you're kind of expecting it. But
Yeah.
when it's something like that comes
Yes.
out of nowhere, it's a different kind of pain.
Absolutely. And so with her, it was, I missed her and I was sad for us, but I wasn't sad for her. Then June, so that was, I think, in May. In June, we lost my uncle unexpectedly. Um, I'm still not clear on what happened, but he was maybe 50. And then the week after that, we lost my aunt also unexpectedly. She had had a knee surgery, and I'm not sure if it was medication related or what exactly happened. But she was 40,
Wow.
and then so that happened in June, and then in August, on the other side of my family, my uncle and his wife and their kids were driving, had a rollover accident, and she passed away. But then in November of the same year, my uncle, he worked on airplanes. He went to open the cabin door and someone had not depressurized the cabin. And then he died. So then we had his children were now orphans. And it got to the point where when the phone rang, it was just like, I don't want to answer it. My cousins were like, Aunt Pat, if you call, I can't answer the phone.
Mhm.
So I would say that was like traumatic grief because it was just bam, bam, and all of them under 50 and all of them tragic accidents, none of them expected. So that was hard, but probably the most difficult loss. Not gonna cry yet. I'm gonna hold on to that.
You could cry. It's okay.
Probably will. And I think it's hard, especially right now because he died in December. But my same brother who was in the horrible accident, that made his life so hard and he struggled. Anyway, so I think it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I'm not good with the dates. Anyway, he passed away unexpectedly. They couldn't find him. There were some weird circumstances, and then they eventually did find him. And there's still so many questions, but that one was hard because the circumstances were so sad. Because he was only 33 and he was such a wonderful person and he had so much life left. But he had struggled so hard. And honestly, and we're gonna move on, but I think I struggled the hardest with it because I had a whole lot of what if I had answered the phone? What if the last time I was there, I had insisted that he let me in his house? What if I had, what if? And as a therapist, what did I miss? How did I miss that? How did I not see that he was struggling as hard as he was? But there was something and after his death, I really did start attending like different professional development because I don't
That's
know,
what we
that's
do.
my therapy.
That's what we do.
And there was and to be clear, he did not die by suicide. That is not what happened. But there was it was a survivors group that was talking, and I was trying to get professional development on suicide prevention, etc. But one of the individuals said the thing that helped them the most was to remember all the times you did show up, all the times you did call, all the times. And that was helpful. And then I was in a different professional development session, and I love David Kessler. He is a grief expert by experience and research. And he said, the mind would rather feel guilty than helpless. And I think that makes so much sense because you can't fix grief, and we want to fix things when they're wrong, and you can't fix it. So rather than feeling helpless, we start thinking, well, I should have if I had. And so he talks about moving from what if to even if I had answered the phone, even if I had insisted that I go in the house, even if that wouldn't necessarily have changed the circumstances.
Right.
Even if the doctors had gotten there sooner, even any of those things. And so there there hasn't been a whole lot that makes that better, but that was a good mindset shift for me, or at least it's helpful. I had to remind myself because I still catch myself. I should have, you know, and I have to remind myself even if I did, I was not in control of that
That's
situation.
the thing, I think, is our brains really want to make sense of it and find some way to have a sense of control.
Yes.
And if we can blame somebody, then okay, we have a reason,
Yes.
even if it's us, you know? And I think that one of the things I had to come to terms with over the past few years with all this loss is we can't control when any of us goes. All we can do is make the most of the time we have now with
Yeah.
the people that are here now and try and learn from it, you know? So if we didn't get to settle things with the people that passed, it's like, okay, but who's still here? So,
Yes.
and cherish that time. You know, you hear people say that a lot, but you don't get it until you go through it.
Well, and to your previous point about once you've been through grief, you're better at supporting other people. As usual, I will tell on myself. When I was younger, I mean, I was an adult, but I was younger. Life hadn't hit me yet. Um, when my grandfather passed away. And I remember doing like we do, trying to cheer up the person that's sad. My grandmother, they had been married for 50 plus year a long time, but I had not experienced a marriage like that, and I had not found my lobster for you friends fanatics. I had not found my person, and so that wasn't registering with me, and I was trying to comfort her, and I was like, "Think about all of the things that you can go do that you've always wanted to
Oh
do."
no.
Right? Because my young adult self was thinking, you loved to do this and he didn't, and now you can do those things.
Yeah.
I would never, ever, ever say that now because having lost someone much closer and now I mean, if something happened to Zach, devastation doesn't even cover it. My life would not exist as it is now. And so I would never say that to someone now. But y'all don't judge me that I was young and dumb. But I didn't understand at the time what that loss really meant. And I just wanted her to feel better. It made me sad to see her sad. And so I think we see that a lot, and that's something that I teach a lot when we do professional development over grief. This one is my own. When in doubt, shut your mouth.
Yeah.
Is a shorter way of saying sometimes your presence is all that's needed.
Most of the time.
Yes. Because there's so many things that um have been said, well meaning, people just don't know what to do.
Mhm.
But, like, I remember at my brother's visitation, this was the oddest thing to me, and again, I didn't yell at anyone like I wanted to. I kept it together, but you could tell they didn't know what to say, and I can't tell you how many people said, "He just looks so good," and I wanted to scream, "He looks dead. Like, stop. Just stop talking.
Mhm.
Like, just go home." And
Yeah.
I know that there was no ill intent, that they were trying to, "What do you say? What do you say? You can't." But that's something too, I'm sure I've said numerous other basically ignorant platitudes
Yeah.
because I didn't understand. I
Mhm.
hadn't experienced it.
I really appreciate the people who just are honest and say, I have no idea what to say right now.
Yes.
I don't think there's anything I can say that will make you feel better. Like, yeah, you're right. You
Yeah.
can't. Thank you. You know, just be honest with your people. If you're
Yeah.
trying to support somebody that's lost a loved one, just sit with them and say, I don't know what to do. I
Yeah.
just want to be here for you. One of the most helpful things that was said to me by a friend of mine is, how can I support you right now?
Yeah.
And even when I couldn't answer the question, that was just, it just felt good to hear that.
Yeah.
And I might say, just sit with me or just come over.
Yeah.
But
I don't want to be
how can I
alone.
support you is a great question to ask anyone, I
Yeah.
think.
I don't know. I tell on myself again after he passed away. So if you're not from the South and you're listening, what do we do in the South when someone passes away?
You bring food.
Food, right? Where do you want this casserole? And I do appreciate that.
But the last thing you want to do is eat.
The last thing you want to do is eat. And then I remember, like, I don't know, the 16th person to walk in with a pie and a casserole. And I looked at them. I think I was just feeling really snarky. And I said, "Not one more person better come in here unless they bring me a pair of stretchy fat pants. Like, I don't even want to see it. Because by the time we eat all this, I'm not going to be able to fit in my clothes." And we were just covered up in, and it was love. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And I know that. But in that moment, it was just like overwhelming. And I'm sitting here thinking somebody's going to have to put all that up. That somebody is going to be me, And so now when I teach psychological first aid and when we talk about crisis and trauma and supporting people, I always say you have to give people jobs because they're going to bring their casserole and you have to tell them because that's just what we do. We want to support their and that's what we do in the South. It's food. Food makes
Hmm. Yeah.
everything better.
I want to say to anyone that's lost someone, if there's someone watching that's going through this maybe for the first time right now, if there's one thing that I would say to you that I hope and pray is helpful is give yourself permission to be selfish during your grieving process. Don't worry about what other people are thinking, how they're going to react, things you have to do. Be selfish. This is the one time in your life when you get to be selfish and say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go to that event.
Mhm.
I don't want to you can because you just lost somebody that's really close to you and you get to be selfish.
Well, and thinking about you saying, I don't want to go to that. This is the perfect time to discuss that, right? Because we're leading into, we have this Christmas and we have this party and we have this and we have this and we have this. That is going to look different. And there are going to be things that aren't as joyful as they used to be. Um, Traditions might need to look different, and people handle that differently. Some people want everything to be the same, and some people are like, I need everything to be different. We were discussing that yesterday, and this was really hard too after my brother died, and continues to be, honestly. Um, I know I'm a trained therapist, but I'm an avoider.
Mm.
I need things to be normal. I don't want to cry in front of anyone, even though I just cried in front of all of you. I don't want to talk about it. My mom needs to talk about it. She needs to say his name out loud. She needs to remember him in our traditions, and she's not wrong. That was
Neither are you.
exactly. And that was very hard, especially right after, because she would call and she needed to talk about it. And I needed to not. And that was really hard.
So what did you do in that situation?
Eventually, and then I felt really guilty about it. But I had to. I was like, I know you need to talk about this, but I can't because it would leave me such a mess that and then I had to go back and support grieving children
Hmm.
and or try to act normal in front of my own kids or go back and do whatever mom thing I was having to do. And so eventually we just kind of had to have that conversation that I understand that you need this, but can't I can't. And that continues to be hard because, like I said, she's not wrong in that she needs to talk about it.
But she can talk about it with someone else.
And I'm not wrong that that's how I grieve. Now, to be clear, I've had plenty of ugly cry sessions. I just prefer to do them alone. So, but I think that's an interest, or not interesting, that's an important point also is that to recognize that how you grieve may not look like what everyone expects or wants it to. One of Chloe's coaches, his dad passed away this weekend, and someone was saying he said he's coming back on Thursday, and I told him don't And I said, I understand what you're saying. Maybe he needs to take some time. But
Maybe it gets better for
for some people, back to normal, that's what they need,
Yeah,
and maybe
absolutely.
he'll process that later. So it looks different for different people. When, when they want to get back to normal, when they need support.
That's why I think that question is so great. How can I support
Mhm.
you? Because you're not trying to fix it for them. You're asking them what they need.
What that
Mm,
looks like for you
mm,
because it looks different for different people. Some people need a hug, some people need to be left alone, some people, need you to call them every day, some people. Now, I will say that eventually, if somebody's completely isolated, then we want to check on them more frequently. And, there's a certain amount of space, but we also don't want that to turn into a deep depression or something of that nature, which also brings another thing that I think about often. And I think most people know this, but we forget. We all show up with our casserole the week of this major loss, but then we kind of go back about our lives, and then we kind of, I don't know if we forget or we just hope that they're better, or sometimes we make the excuse that we're giving space. And really, when that support is needed the most is months later, when the shock is worn off, or the next year, or around the holidays. That doesn't just, I think that time heals all wounds is such a lie.
And we still don't know what to do months later. It's
Yeah.
like, so just come back and say the same thing. Hey, just checking in because I still don't know what to do. I still don't know what to say, but I want you to know I love you and I'm here.
Yeah, because I've heard that too. We were discussing that yesterday, my friend Kim and I. She had a friend say, well, their husband died 10 years ago. They just really should be over that by now. And it's like, back to my prior point, clearly you have not had that kind of a loss because it changes and it ebbs and flows, but it doesn't go away. You don't
Mm,
just wake up 5 years later and go, well, it was a nice life, but they're gone and moving on.
mhm.
That's just not how it works.
I describe it as like the ocean. Like sometimes the tide is high and it
Hmm.
hits and you don't really know when it's going to hit you, but sometimes it hits and it hits hard
Yeah.
and you just out of nowhere find yourself crying or, you don't want to get out of bed for the day.
Yeah.
And then other times tide's low and it's just okay, I can get through life.
Yeah.
But you don't know when that's going to hit you and it doesn't matter how much time passes.
No.
Mhm.
I think that's something that I'm very aware of because of what I do. And I talk about trauma reminders and I talk about grief reminders. But even as someone who's very aware, I have been completely caught off guard by the most random things. My brother, even though he was legally blind, I will give great credit to my mom that she worked really hard for him to be independent. And he was. And he had gone to the school for the blind in Little Rock after he graduated high school. And he was leading a bunch of the other students who were possibly completely blind. He was taking them to Walmart or something like that. And he got stopped. Like somebody thought he was kidnapping a bunch of the students from the school for the blind. And he was like, I am one, whatever. But I was at Walmart probably 2 years after he passed away. And there was a little group of, I feel like they were probably at a residential facility or something, but they were all walking together. I couldn't, I had to park. I couldn't see to drive. I cried for probably 45 minutes. I like snot everywhere, couldn't quit. And I was fine when I got there.
Mhm.
And it was just that visual reminded me of that memory and I lost it.
Yeah.
And that was 2 or more years after he passed. It wasn't, I mean, just random. So definitely, I think, if anything, if you're listening and you've experienced something like that, you're not crazy, you're not losing it. That I think that continues forever, possibly.
Another thing too, when you're grieving and, I want to say there's no right or wrong way to grieve. Everybody's timeline's different. I was thinking about my mom's cell phone. Like
Mm,
after she passed, I paid her cell phone bill for a year
mm,
after she passed. I couldn't bring myself to call. the phone company had turned the cell phone off.
Mhm.
It was a year later, guys. And I'm not a person that likes to waste money, so that was just I couldn't do it, and
Yeah.
then so a year
Like,
later, I did it, but something I still do is she's still in my contacts, like, on my
mhm.
favorites list. She's right there. Her
Yeah.
phone's not on anymore, but
Yeah.
her contact name and picture is right there in my favorites, in my texts, pins,
Yeah.
and I don't know if I'll ever take it off. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's just
And there's nothing wrong with that if you don't.
so everybody's different, and give yourself permission, whatever it is you need, you know?
Yeah. So I feel like this is so cliche, but grief is really just love that doesn't have anywhere to go. And if you have a lot of grief, then you had a lot of love.
Mhm.
Um, and it, like we said, it looks different. Grieving both of my grandmothers, actually, they were so ready, and they had such great faith that I wasn't sad for them. Sad for me, but not sad for them, which is very different. The grief that I have for my brother, still sad for me, but sad for so many other reasons. And then too, sometimes we don't um, recognize it as grief, publicly recognize it as grief. But, like getting a divorce, that's a loss. That's a loss of an idealized life.
Mm,
That is never going to come to fruition the way that you thought it was. Not being able to, there's so many things, not being able to join the military because your eyesight's not good enough. Lots of different things fall into that category. And something else that I'm reminded of is there is no grief Olympics, right?
right.
There is no medal for worst case scenario. And I feel like sometimes too, we find ourselves in situations where we're like, well, I really shouldn't feel sad about this because at least I didn't experience that.
Yes. I can't tell you how many clients I see that I have to tell them your grief is valid just because it's
Yeah.
not what you think is the worst possible scenario. It doesn't mean it's not valid. Your
Yeah.
grief is valid. Your feelings are always valid.
Yeah. Regardless of the level of loss and what that looks like. And I think that sometimes we struggle to process some of that grief because we don't allow ourselves to say that's what it is because we feel like it doesn't qualify, so to speak, because somebody else had it worse.
Mm,
Also, I'm not sure if you have experienced this, probably have, but for whatever reason, I find this so interesting, really, because every December for the past 6 years, I send out a monthly newsletter with my day job. And every month I kind of have a theme and I give resources and information. And every December, I focus it on grief and saying how to handle the holidays and whatever, because I think that we have so many kids that struggle with the school break and then, staff or everyone. And it is always my most read newsletter by probably 500 views more that in the month of December, which tells me this is a very universal experience. I don't know very many people who escape life with zero amount of grief, right?
right.
So if we all have some level of experience with grief, why do you think we have such a difficult time supporting people and maneuvering that?
I think it's that lack of control. We all want
Yeah.
to fix it. We want to find something, do something. And we know deep down there's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can say. All you can do is sit with the person. And that really does help. It really does. Just be there for them. But I think that it's that control factor. We want to somehow control things or feel like we can control things.
Right. And that's really such an illusion because we don't control much of
Right.
anything, to be honest. But it really, I think it shakes our sense of safety when we can't control. And so grief is hard for that reason. But like we were talking yesterday, my friend Kim and I, about how some reactions are really not accepted, or you know what I mean? Like if I were to be really angry at the person who passed, then people would be like, that's so like you don't speak
Ill of the
ill of the
dead.
dead and that kind of thing, right? Even if circumstances warrant that, or if there's relief. I've had, clients and other people say, it really was terrible and I feel awful to say, but it's a relief that I'm not dealing with that anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that again gets you I can't believe they said that. And I just find that really interesting because I feel like it's probably more common,
It
but we
is.
still feel socially like we need to re-narrate the story and rewrite it as if it really wasn't that bad or it really was, you know what I mean?
And that's why I think the support groups are really helpful. When you
Mhm.
sit with other people who have experienced those things, you
Yeah.
see that it is very common and
Yes.
it's really normal. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah. I highly, highly recommend support groups. Obviously, both of us believe that counseling is a good thing because we've dedicated our careers to it. But in a lot of cases for grief and other, other things like that, sometimes the support group of other people who have experienced similar things is more therapeutic or more helpful than just sitting with a professional, I think. I highly recommend support groups because again, they really get it. They've been there.
Well, I think you need both. I think you need
Yeah,
your
yeah,
therapist,
yeah,
but you also need your support group.
yeah. No, I would agree with that because there are some things that you may need to work out with your personal situation, but it really does help to have the support of other people who really have been there. And like we were talking about, you may have really great support networks, church and friends and colleagues, but they may not always be the best help because they may be the ones that are like, oh, you'll be fine. It's sunny outside. And that's just so really not helpful. So I think finding the right support when you're struggling through grief or working through grief, or maybe you're, working, through it pretty well.
Yeah.
But I think that's helpful. That's another thing that I was thinking about that I was going to ask you. What are some things that you felt like were helpful to work through grief instead of working around it? Unless you're like me and you just skirted around it. I'm still a work in progress.
I don't know. I think just the passage of time. What was helpful for me in the beginning was being around people who also had lost, like I'm thinking about my mom, particular situation, like being around people who had also lost their
Mm.
mothers that were close to my age, those that came to her celebration of life and, all of those things. Just their presence, I think, because I knew that they got it. And that somehow made me feel less alone
Yeah,
because there were a lot of other people there that still had their parents, still had their mom. And I appreciated them being there, but I knew that they couldn't understand
yeah,
because they could go home and call their mom.
yeah, and that's different.
So that was helpful for me. Giving myself permission to just say, I don't want to do that, whatever it is. Or, yeah, no, thanks. I'm not going to,
Yeah.
like
Well, that's why you have great boundaries. And that's why I picked you for the first conversation we had.
it was helpful though. I have to say, just being able to say no sometimes and saying, I would rather do this and not caring what other people thought about it.
Yeah. We touched on this a little bit ago, but being able to say, I would like to do this differently now. I want, we always did Christmas this way, but I would like to change this,
Yeah.
or I would like to keep it the same. And I need that to look the same, but being able to speak up for what you need. I would say definitely having a few really good friends that I could really say the dark things out loud. And that's hard. That's really hard. But I think that has helped me work through it some because I feel like when you don't, then that tends to fester and that tends to create other problems, whether it's avoidance or relationship problems or just a whole host of other things. But when you're able to name it and say the hard things out loud, then sometimes it takes away the power, if that makes sense.
We haven't talked about this, but what about like, I don't know, and I don't know what your beliefs are about this, but for myself and for my daughter, I think it helps us a lot when we see, because my mom used to tell us, when you see a cardinal,
Mhm.
it's an angel, a loved one that's passed on. So now when we call them red birds. When we see a red bird, oh, that's mom, that's
Mhm.
Nia. My daughter calls her Nia. And so It or butterflies, see
Yes.
a butterfly.
Yeah.
There's Nia, I don't know, it makes me feel better, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna keep doing that. I don't care
Yeah.
what you think about it.
So we also do same thing. We've heard the same thing. When you see a cardinal, a red bird, then that's your loved one looking over you.
Mm,
But yes, things like that I do think are comforting. And whatever your faith is, whatever those beliefs are, it has been comforting to me. And what I've always, my kids were very young when all of those losses happened. So they didn't fully understand. And I always told them, we can be sad for us, but if we really believe what we say we believe, then they're where we all hope to be someday. They're
mhm.
exactly where they want to be.
I choose to believe that they can come back and check on us, and they send us the signs,
Yeah.
and so that makes me feel better too.
So different things like that are helpful and comforting
Mm,
too, I think.
and it's okay if that doesn't work for you, if that's not what you believe, that's okay too,
Yeah.
Everybody has to find their own way, I think.
Yeah. No, I would definitely agree with that. Every story is unique, every hurt is unique, and everyone's path, hopefully, to healing, which again, I don't know that it's not like a scab that goes away. Um, but hopefully you find ways to honor that person and still find joy in your life
Yeah.
and still find joy even in their memories.
Mm,
Get to a point where you can talk about them and laugh about things that were funny or, good memories that you had, and not only focus on the loss.
mhm.
I think maybe that's the goal
Yeah.
more so than moving on, which doesn't doesn't
Yeah.
really happen.
I think for me, it probably took about 2 years to get to that place
Mhm.
with my mom. I think the first year after each loss was just kind of shock and
Yes.
just like trying to figure out what your life is now
Yeah.
without this person because you have your life when they were here and then your life after is totally different. So just trying to figure that out was the first year. And then the second year was coming to terms, I think,
Yeah.
and finding ways to go on. You don't move on, but you go on.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's kind of where the title for the episode came from, actually, A Million Goodbyes. That's another thing that I learned from David Kessler was it's not one big acceptance. It's not you wake up and you say, okay, that happened. It's a million little acceptances. It's turning off the cell phone. It's, not buying that Christmas present this year. It's, not making an extra dressing because they didn't like onions. It's all of those little things over and over. It's a million little goodbyes versus one big, okay.
And some people may still make the dressing without
Uh-huh.
onions, and I think that's okay too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some
And
people
there's
still set a
a
place.
place. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know I've seen that like at weddings. They have a seat for that special person. And I think embracing those things, finding ways that you're comfortable with to still honor the loss, I think that that is also a good path toward healing. That's not a sign of they're still struggling.
Well, I wanted to read Erica's quote because I asked her, my friend Erica Sykes, she's also an LPC and she's had her own a lot of experience with grief, unfortunately. But I asked her about the question from David Kessler or the statement about how people would rather feel guilty than helpless. And I asked her how she navigated that. And she said, grief is a journey, and sometimes the should have and could have moments will take over. Important to remember to always show yourself grace on the grief journey. I shifted my focus from what I missed or didn't get to do to the impact that my loved one made on my life. And I
Well,
thought
that's
that
really
was really
good.
good. Yeah.
I do love that. And I do think that's comforting too, to think about the things, the way that they did make an impact, the way that they did show up. Yeah, that's really good. Okay. Well, this was heavy, but hopefully helpful. I do want to close with something that Ernest Hemingway once said. He is definitely by far a better writer than I. So I am just going to read his thoughts, but I think that they go along perfectly with what we've talked about today. He said, in our darkest moments, we don't need advice. What we truly need is the power of human connection, a quiet presence, a gentle touch, or the smallest gesture that reminds us we're not alone. These acts of love and solidarity become the anchors that hold us steady when life feels overwhelming. Pain is a deeply personal burden, and difficulties are uniquely ours to face. But your silent presence tells me that I don't have to face them in isolation. It's a quiet reminder that no matter how lost I feel, I am still worthy of love and connection. Sometimes words aren't necessary. Your silent support speaks louder than anything else. Love, in its purest form, has the power to help us rediscover ourselves, even when we've forgotten who we are. So, I appreciate you so much, Natalie, for sharing and for being brave enough to talk about something really hard. I only cried once, very proud of myself. So, if you have listened this far, thank you so much for trusting us with your time. If you're a new listener, thank you for joining us. And if this was remotely helpful or you think of anyone who would benefit from hearing that they're not alone this holiday season, please do share because we want everyone to understand that while grief is hard, we don't have to face it alone. So that's it for this time, and we'll see you next time on Dishing with Dr. Duer. Thank you.
Bye.